on Daf Mem Tes Amud Base 49b, and we've been learning some Agadah Gemara that's homiletic, some interesting little insights over here. We learned about drinking wine. Should be that if you want to get the most out of it, take a large gulp. And that was learned from the fact that the Mizbeach is supposed to look full and satisfied from wine. We learned about different concepts of tzedakah that we learned about going to be Oila Regel, being Oila Regel. We are similar to Avram Avinu, Bas Nadiv, Mayofu, Pa Mecha, Bana Olim, Bas Nadiv. How beautiful it is to be Oila Regel. Our got everyone coming. And just like Avram Avinu, and I see they bring down that Avram was the first to be makriv, or Avram was the Rishon that was Ola L'Makam Hamikdash, the first that went up to the place of the Beis Hamikdash to bring his son as a korban. He went to Harabayas, the mountain where the Beis Hamikdash is, to bring his son as a korban, which does sound a little. It sounds questionable because I think it says that that Adam Arishon also went there, and Noach. I guess we have to look at those midrashim. But they bring down that it mentions Avram because Avram was the one who brought his son, implying like that's the first. Avram was the first that went to the Beis Hamikdash, and when we are Oila Regel, we are called the Bas Nadiv, the daughter of the devoted one. And then the Gemara talks about Divrei Torah is supposed to be done in private, b'seser, b'tzina, with modesty or humility and privacy, not in a place where people are running, not in the shuk, not in the marketplace. And there seems to be two reasons why it mentions this law. One is that it's not honor for the Torah to just be out there in the, being taught in the marketplace. Another reason is it looks like haughtiness that a person is studying Torah in such a public area where it looks like he's showing off. So those would be the two reasons why Torah is supposed to be done in a more hidden way. Now or at least in private, I should say. The Shulchan Aruch does bring this idea. It says it brings from a different pasuk. We understood it because it's Chamuke Yirei Chayech, like the Chaloyim Maise Yedei Yaman. We said that just like your thighs are covered or concealed, so also the luchais that were carved by Hashem, that were made from precious stones, right, and carved out by Hashem. So they also, the term chaloyim, jewels, is the luchais, like the chaloyim, like the jewels, the precious stones, Maisi Yedei Aman, that was the work of Hashem, and so it should be similar to Chamuke Yirei Chayech. So it's supposed to be done. So the Shulchan Aruch brings down that if a person is toiling in Torah b'tzina, in privacy, machkim, he's going to become wise. Shenemar, as it says, v'es tzenuim chachma. The tzenua people People who are modest, they will be blessed with wisdom. So that's the it seems to be the Shulchan Aruch's law, which is based on our Gemara, maybe another Gemara as well, because it brings a different pasuk. But that's the idea mentioned in our Gemara about Torah is meant to be done in a way of tzina, in a way of modesty. It's interesting because we know Rabbi Akiva had 24,000 students, so it couldn't have been too small. It was not exactly done in a secretive way. There, you had a nice big study hall of 24,000, or at least however many were there at the same time. Yeah, but
it could have been there. The translation of humble as opposed to private.
Yeah. So if we can do it today.
Right. But what does it mean then? In other words, I mean, the Shulchan Aruch uses the word bitzina. The Gemara uses the word beseser. Both of them, beseser means in a hidden place. It does not. I mean, the literal translation does not mean with humility. It could be that's the reason. Why should you do it, beseser? Because you're supposed to be humble. You know what I mean? But the word beseser, and the same thing is with betzina. Anivus would be more humble. The word beseser, Yoshev beseser elyon, seser is hidden, Tsanua is tsanuim chachma, betzina. The Iyar b'Talmud betzina. I don't think that would be the right word if it means with humility. It literally means betzina, and maybe the reason is because it's supposed to be done with humility. But like it says in Pirkei Avos, va'amidu talmidim harbe, have many students. So if you have many students, it's not exactly going to be betzina. I got a.
Betzina is what women.
Well, literally, it means in a hidden, in a modest place. Like you do it in a quiet, in a hidden place, in a hidden room. It's like when people who smoke on Tisha B'Av, though they're supposed to smoke in a betzina. You're not supposed to smoke in public. It's questionable about smoking. So people who smoke on Tisha B'Av, at least 30 years ago, when it was like more common for people to smoke. Now it's almost like unheard of. But then in yeshiva, I remember, so they used to go to one room and they would call this is the betzina room, and they would smoke on Tisha B'Av. But it was, in private. Betzina really would mean like in private. You're right. The word tsanua is tznius with women means modesty, but it's more of the word literally normally means more of a fact rather than a state of mind. In other words, there's a state of mind of tsanua, like humility, or you feel modest. But there's generally the literal meaning of the word is more of a physical being in a private, being tsanua, dressed modestly. It does carry with it that idea that it also means, that you feel there is a feeling of modesty. But anyway, so the Gemara uses this idea that the Gemara Rashi brings from Moed Katan that like you're not supposed to learn in the shuk. Again, it doesn't mean some spiritual idea there. It's practically don't learn in the marketplace. Now, what's the meaning behind it? It could be that it's not honor for the Torah, or it could be that it is an element of haughtiness, showing off in front of other people, maybe. There's truth to what you're saying, David. I just think the literal meaning of it, the Seser, is sort of implying that it's done more in a hidden place, in a private place. The Seser. I mean, you have thousands of students, and it's done. I guess that's considered private. Even though you have a minyan, normally we would say a minyan is called public, but I guess that's not the meaning here. It's not done in an open, in the open. It's not done in the open. Maybe that's the idea, that it's done. There's an element of concealment, an element of it's not done in the open. Yes, Jeffrey.
Well, the Torah certainly doesn't have that model, because Moshe is sitting all day long and everybody sees him and they're waiting online.
Well, think about the giving of the Torah at Har Sinai, right?
Well, that's more acceptable, but his daily activity. And secondly, I would not have met you at all because my clever neighbor, Mr. Jacobowitz, saw me studying on my tailgate. The only reason I met you. So I would say once in a while it's good that way, and once in a while it's good the other way.
Right. So the question is, so what does it mean? Yeah, good point, especially about Moshe Rabbeinu. So you could say that in the desert it's called B'tzina. You could say maybe Har Sinai. You could say these were not public. These were not places of residence where people where people lived. They were of populace of. These were areas maybe where there weren't people around, so maybe that's why it wasn't considered a problem. I mean, definitely was not a concept of Yuara. They weren't showing off, and I guess that did bring great kavod to the Torah. At least Har Sinai was a great kavod, a great honor to the Torah. But I guess when it's continued that way, in other words, it's almost like important matters. You don't just shout out. You speak to people like a mensch. You don't just scream them in the street. So it sounds like that. It's a more of a
modesty.
Respectable. What's the word?
It's still modesty.
Modesty. Yeah. Okay.
Modest word.
So it's more of a modest type of thing. So yeah, that. I mean, there are times when we daven in the Rechiva Shel Iyar for rain, and it says that on these fast days they would have divrei kibushim, words of inspiration, and I guess that would have been Torah. Was that done in the same Rechiva Shel Iyar? I'll have to take a look at in the Gemara Tainus again, how that was done. But in any event, what?
Yes,
it was done in the Chayva Shel Iyar, even the Divrei Kibushim. So
yeah, so that's the beginning of the second parak.
Yeah, so it sounds like there are times when we do things like in public, even in the shuk. Even in the shuk. Even though the Gemara says that Divrei Torah wasn't the Gemara in Ma'id Katan that the Rashi brings that Rav decreed not to do Torah in the shuk, but b'shuk, not to teach your students. Goiva shal Iyar v'loy lishneis talmida b'shuk darmidim Ma'id Katan. So I guess there's exceptions, like Jeffrey was saying, that there's that maybe there are exceptions to the rule. The Shulchan Aruch just leaves it more of a concept of success, that ve'es tzinuim chachma, that if you do it b'tzina, the truth is the Shulchan Aruch doesn't say you're not allowed to. It says that if you learn b'tzina, machkim, it'll give you it'll give you chachma, it'll give you wisdom. So the truth of the matter is the Shulchan Aruch doesn't make it like a prohibition. But anyway, it is interesting to understand what exactly would fall into this category of not doing Yibbit and that would be inappropriate. There is another understanding in our Gemara that it's comparing learning Torah to the second tablets, not to the first tablets. And the second tablets were done without all the fanfare. The first tablets, Moshe Rabbeinu came down from heaven, and what happened? He saw them worshiping the golden calf, and he smashed the first tablets. Mm-hmm. The second tablets were done without all the fanfare, and those are the ones that lasted. So there seems to be a concept of things done without all the, with the ayin hara won't affect it if it's done in a more modest way. See, I was in England, in the yeshiva there with there was before I was there, they made a siyum sefer Torah, and then sometime later there was a fire in the yeshiva, and the sefer Torah burned. It was real sad that they made such a event and everything, and it was a big honor for the Torah, and then one of the Torah scrolls, the new Torah scroll burned, and so when I came there, they were in the midst of writing a new Torah scroll, and when they made the second Siyum Sefer Torah, when they made the celebration, they asked they had asked the Rebbe what to do. The Rebbe had asked Rabbanim, so the Rabbanim said you should make it not as public as the first one, because when you make something really public, sometimes it could cause ayin hara. So the second, an evil eye. So they made a Siyum Sefer Torah, but they did it with less, not as extravagant. And that was the psak they got. It was supposed to be similar to the second tablets. The first tablets, like ayin hara affected it. The evil eye caused that the Yidden worshiped the golden calf, and it ended up that they got smashed, that Moshe smashed them. But the second tablets, they didn't have the whole revelation at Sinai. Moshe came down Yom Kippur and he gave us the tablets, but it wasn't done with the whole revelation that was done with the first tablet, when we had the revelation at Sinai. The second tablets were much less public, much less extravagant, and those are what lasted. So there is an understanding here that it's comparing to it's comparing Torah kamay chaloim ma'aseh yedei aman. It's like the luchais, like the chaloim, the special stones that were done by uman, by a craftsman, meaning Moshe Rabbeinu, because Moshe was the one who carved out the second tablets. Carve out and you could keep the extra. That's how Moshe got wealthy, from the extra stones. But he carved out the two tablets from the sapphire, and so it's Maisi Dayam. So the Torah should be similar to like the second tablets, that it shouldn't be done with that causing an ayin hara. It should be done like it should be more like the second tablets that were done b'tzina. They were given in more of a with more privacy. Anyway, bottom line is our Gemara is darshaning, is expounding on this pasuk that talks about aliyah l'regel, and it talks about things done in private, like learning Torah should be done in private. So the understanding is
How can it be? How private can it be in front of 600,000 men
Right,
between the ages of 20 and 60? In
right,
front of
which
two
is
and a
like
half million people.
right, right. But so the understanding is that it was done without all the fanfare. There's like it's an element of some type of um, hiding, of concealment. Not uh, not not emphasizing the full extent of the event, concealing some of it in a more modest way. So that's what it's that's how the tablets, the second tablets. Moshe came down. You're right. Everyone was there. Everyone got them, but it wasn't the same type of event as Matan Torah was. So anyway, bottom line is that the connection the Gemara is comparing is that even though when you're Oila Regel, you do with great publicity. When they would go up to be Oila Regel, to go to the pilgrimage for the holidays, even though then we do it, Mayofu pa mayach olim, how wonderful it is with you that you go up and you walk and that you're Oila Bas Nadiv, following in the footsteps of Avram Avinu. Nevertheless, certain things you shouldn't do with such publicity. And that's the beginning of the pasuk and the end of the pasuk. Nevertheless, there are things that should be done with hatsnei alechas, which with certain tznius, and that's the continuation, and that's how our Gemara is continuing from the earlier teaching about the Oila Regel. In the same pasuk continues about the Chamuke Yerechayech, which is the hiddenness of the concealment of your thighs. Okay.
The story that you told before about the burned Sefer Torah, where was that?
In Manchester, England. They had a fire there. Unfortunately, the Torah.
About what year?
Well, I was there in 1991. The fire must have been in 1990, 1989, 1990. So the Gemara mentions about the importance, how great it is, and how Hashem seeks out from you asois mishpat, avas chesed, and hatznei alechas. And the Gemara said that doing mishpat is din. That's referring to din, and seemingly it either means like din Torah or it means to act properly, a proper menschlichkeit. And avas chesed is like doing acts of gemilas chasadim, helping each other and being kind to each other. And hatznei aleches im Hashem alekecha, the Gemara says that's similar. That's referring to levaya and chasana. Why is it referring to a levaya and a chasana? So we said because it says leches, and the word lecha, Rashi brings this, that it says toiv laleches al beis aval mileches al beis mishta. That's better to go to a house of mourning than a house of a wedding. So you see the term leches is used there. So and the Gemara mentions that it's mentioning about tznius. It means even in these two situations, which basically means that when a person gives a eulogy, they shouldn't overdo it, which I think is the reason why among Hasidim it's common, like they don't do any eulogies because we're afraid you might exaggerate. And if a person exaggerates, it's sort of like it's like a claim against the deceased. Like, why didn't you do that? This person is saying that you were so generous and so kind and such a scholar, and then the person really wasn't. so then it's sort of like used as a taina against the person, like a claim against the person. Why didn't he reach? Why didn't he meet that standard and that level? I think that's connected to this idea of hatsnei aleches, of not of a person should be careful when they give a hesped, um, that it should be done with tznius, with modesty, and by a wedding, not to get drunk, basically, not to over act in a way that's humiliating and it's lightheaded. Even though Vayigba liboy b'darkei havaya, even though there is a concept of when you like David Hamelach, David Macharker b'chol ois, he rejoiced when they were bringing the ark to Yerushalayim. So he was rejoicing, and Michal, his wife, was very upset that he's acting too lightheaded, rejoicing too much. And he argued back with her and said, "No, this is for Hashem. For Hashem, there's nothing too much." But our Gemara, I guess, sees it that if at a wedding, maybe there is some type of a limit that person can. There is, maybe it's a little different. At a Hachnasa Sefer Torah, maybe you could go overboard over there, but maybe at a wedding it's more of a kalus roish. I'm not sure how you differentiate, and to what extent is our Gemara lahalacha? Like, is this broad in halacha about a person being humble when they dance at a chasana? Of course, kalus roish, lightheadedness is obviously inappropriate, but what does that mean? Like, can a person do some crazy, a person, you always have the some Rosh Hashivas, they're so like below their dignity almost to dance in a wild way. Others, like they sort of let themselves loose and they'll dance, and they don't sort of feel that there's a problem. So the question is, where do you draw the line? And I guess we'd have to see if this is broad in halacha. I'm looking on the side here that it says I don't see any note that it brings us to Reish Mem Vav is Shulchan Aruch about Talmud Torah. I don't see it broad in halacha. So if it's brought down about obviously we could say that kalus roish, lightheadedness, getting drunk maybe would be inappropriate, but to dance in a more wild way, maybe that's appropriate at a chasana. So it seems like maybe only kalus roish, only like acting in a very lightheaded way, that would be where it's inappropriate. Limud b'seiser. Yeah, they don't seem to bring this. They don't seem to bring this lahalacha about the hespedim, or at least I don't see it here about hespedim. I have to look up and see if there's any other source about hespedim, about eulogies, and I don't see here much about the. See, they bring on the bottom here, they have a note that person should do mitzvahs betzina. Hatznei aleches, do mitzvahs betzina. So he says maybe this is the meaning. Nira shazu kavonas harama. this is what the Ramah means. Don't be embarrassed mipnei b'nei adam, from other people that laugh at you when you're serving Hashem. Gam b'atznei aleches, even when you are acting in a humble way. In other words, it's saying that don't be embarrassed of other people, and also b'atznei aleches. Also, you should do things b'tzina. In other words, there seems to be two ways of translating. It's a statement in the beginning of the Shulchan Aruch, what they're quoting here, the beginning of the Code of Law. So it says, don't be embarrassed of other people. And it says, Gam b'hatznei aleches. The Ramah, it's a little vague how the Ramah writes those words also when you're acting modestly. So the way they're translating it is also that you should act modestly when you're doing mitzvahs. Act modestly. Do it in a modest way, in a secretive way, in a private way. But there seems to be other ways of understanding it, not learning that way. In other words, it means even when you're in a private area, you should also serve Hashem the same way. But the way this other commentary wants to learn is also you should make sure to serve Hashem in a private way. Like, is it saying serve Hashem privately, or is it saying serve Hashem even when you're in private? In other words, the Shulchan Aruch talks about in private in the beginning of Shulchan Aruch. But there are two ways to learn it. You can learn it that it means even when you're in private, make sure to serve Hashem. Don't think that no one sees you. Hashem sees you, Hashem sees you, and therefore you should serve Hashem even in private. Or it means that when you're serving Hashem, make sure to do it in a more private way. So those are two ways of learning the beginning of Shulchan Aruch. And if you learn that like the second way that I just said, that's sort of like the source would be our Gemara, that when you're doing these mitzvahs, make sure to do them more in a private way. Don't do it in an open way. Anyway, bottom line is that there seems to be a concept of tznius when you're doing these mitzvahs. And the Gemara says, a kal v'chomer. If these things that are normally done in public, like a hesped, eulogy, a chasana, so these things you should do sort of like in a modest way. Kal v'chomer, for sure, things that are normally done in private, for sure you should do it in a way of privacy. Now, yesterday I said, but there is another pshat that Rashi, another interpretation over here, Rashi brings, that when you give money to help someone make their wedding, to help someone pay for their funeral, help the relatives pay for the funeral of their deceased. So those things, so it's you should do it in a private way, and for sure other mitzvahs. So we're trying to think about how what's the real kal v'chomer. It's not exactly a kal v'chomer. We were a little struggling with it. But I see they bring down that the explanation is as follows. When people make a chasana, there is often a GoFundMe. The people who help out. So it's done somewhat in a farhesya, in a public way. These type of mitzvahs are sometimes done in a public way, like people are helping out with tzedakah. So it says if these things that are done publicly, you should be do it in a hatznei aleches, in a modest way. So kal v'chomer, for sure, things that are done in privately, like giving regular charity to a poor person, for sure it should be done privately. So this answers our question that we struggled with a little yesterday. I didn't see what was the kal v'chomer? These mitzvahs you should do private. Those mitzvahs you should do private. Why are these? Why is it? How is it a kal v'chomer? If these you do private, for sure those. But the answer is because certain mitzvahs are more public mitzvahs. Like people get together, like the wealthy people in the community. They seem to, they want to help out and pay for a funeral. If the family couldn't afford it, they pay for the wedding. And so those things are done more farhesya. And still the Torah says, make sure to do it in a private way. You're giving charity for these causes, and they're public. It's done being done, but still do it in a hatsnei alechas way, in a tznius way, in a modest way. So kal v'chomer for sure, things that are not done in public, so those type of mitzvahs, you should keep them private and not publicize it. Then the Gemara talked about great is giving tzedakah more than all the sacrifices, and brings a pasuk that giving charity is greater than all the sacrifices. That's a famous thing you see in the world. How sometimes people they rip other people off, scam people, but then when it comes to shul, all of a sudden they just gave $100,000 to to the shul. They get the publicity, but in the meantime, they scammed a few people. But it comes to shul, it's give a sacrifice. Oh, I'm going to give a big sacrifice. We're going to bring a sacrifice. So the Belazar says, greater is giving tzedakah than all of your big sacrifices. You brought you gave $100,000 to shul, and you're bringing all the carbon oilas, burnt offerings, and shlamim. No, greater is giving tzedakah than all of these, than all of the sacrifices. It's more appropriate and better. It's greater giving tzedakah, giving charity. And now, then the Gemara says that tzedakah is really according to the bother, according to the chesed that's involved. That means that how much it took out of you in order to help. So the reward for tzedakah is according to the chesed that's in it. You brought it to the person's house, you gave it to him, you cooked it, you gave it to him when he could use it. How much was involved? What type of chesed was involved when you gave the tzedakah? Did you give it to him at a time when he couldn't even benefit from it? So this is what it says: Zaru lachem, ziru lachem l'tzedakah v'kitzur l'fi chesed. The reward is according to the amount of chesed that's in it. That you gave it to him at a time. Imagine giving to a poor person food for money for Shabbos after the kosher stores close. You go to his house, it's a half hour before Shabbos. You feel really bad. You give him $100 for his Shabbos meal. He's a poor person, but the kosher store is already closed. So here it says that the tzedakah, the reward for tzedakah is when it's lefi hachesed, according to the amount of kindness that's involved. Like, is he benefiting from it? Is there did you keep it? Did you take into consideration how he can benefit from it? And then the Gemara talked about the differences between gemilas chasadim and tzedakah. Tzedakah is giving money to poor, and chesed is giving, doing acts of kindness, helping someone in their needs, not only with money, it's also with your body, doing physical labor for them, helping them. They need a ride, they need you to carry something, be masameach chasan v'kala, go to a wedding and rejoice with them, or go to a escort escort someone who's visiting, or be involved to help out with the levaya, with the burial. So that's all gemilas chasadim. It doesn't have to do with someone with giving money. It's helping someone else with their needs. Then there's also tzedakah is for poor people, and chesed, gemilas chasadim, is for the poor or the rich. And tzedakah is only for the living, and chesed is for the gemilas chasadim, for the living and for the deceased, because there's types of chesed you can do. You can't give tzedakah to a deceased person, but you can do a chesed for them by the people who do the tahara. They're doing a chesed for the person, and other honors, other ways of honoring the deceased. That would be gemilas chasadim.
They call chesed shalemis.
Chesed shalemis, right? It's called chesed, not called tzedakah. It's called chesed. Correct.
There's a lot of funds that have to do with people that passed away, and cemeteries are called chesed shalemis.
Right. Okay, now we're up to the next little piece of Gemara. We're on page 49b. And we are V'amar Rabbi Elazar kol ha'isa tzedakah.
This is page 240 in the Steinsaltz.
Page 240 in the Steinsaltz. Thank you. And we are 49b, about 10 lines up from the bottom of the page. Maybe 11 lines up from the bottom of the page. The Amar Rabbi Elazar, 49b. Amar Rabbi Elazar, kolei tzedakah mishpat kilu milei kolam kulei chesed. Whoever does tzedakah in mishpat, which means you give charity according to what the people need. Person who needs more gets more. Person who needs less gets less. And he does tzedakah and mishpat. Gives according to his understanding. And another way of translating this is you do for others, you do tzedakah, you give charity, unlimited. For yourself, you take mishpat. You see what you need. I need this. That's what I'm taking. But I'm not using extra money for myself. This I don't need. I don't need to have the most fanciest car. I don't need to have this. I can get away with that. But tzedakah to help someone else. So he does tzedakah and mishpat. So the Gemara says. So these are two pshatim. Either tzedakah or mishpat is the tzedakah charity in a way that you understand what the other person needs. That's tzedakah and mishpat, just charity and justice. Or it means regarding yourself, you do mishpat. Regarding others, you do tzedakah. The two interpretations. So if you do this, chesed, as if you filled the whole world with chesed, with kind of shneim, it says tzedakah mishpat. A person who loves tzedakah, doing charity and mishpat, injustice, chesed Hashem malach haaretz. You cause that the kindness of Hashem fills the earth. So it says Shema Toimar. Maybe you're going to say kol habo likbais kaifetz. Whoever wants to do charity, Hashem will help him, and he'll be giving charity to the right people. Talmud Loimar, the pasuk tells us, "My yakar chastecha Elokim." How precious is your kindness, Elokim Hashem, which means that kindness is something that's very precious, and it takes a lot of work to merit that you give it to the right people. In other words, it's not so simple. You think it's simple to do charity. It's not true. It's not true. It's not always simple to do charity. So what does this mean? So Chesed Hashem Mola Haaretz, it says. One second. What's the word? Chesed, yeah, it's in Tehillim Lamed Gimel. Ayev tzedakah mishpat Chesed Hashem Mola Haaretz. The Chesed of Hashem fills the earth. So it's talking about the person who loves to do chesed, tzedakah, and mishpat. In his merit, chesed Hashem mola haaretz. The chesed of Hashem will fill the earth. that if it would say chastoi malaharetz, his kindness fills the earth, that would mean that by doing this kindness, what does it say? Oyev tzedakah mishpat, chesed malaharetz, the kindness will fill the earth. No, it's the chesed of Hashem that you sort of like need to rely on the kindness of Hashem in order to get the right. Basically, what this means is that you can give tzedakah, but not always does it go to the right place. You gave tzedakah, this person you thought was really in need. This person really wasn't so much in need. The other person that you gave only $5 to, that guy really needed it. The person you gave $100 to, maybe he didn't need it. You know, like you never really know with tzedakah. Tzedakah is a very tricky thing. And so if you merit, your money will go to real tzedakah, if you merit it. The chesed of Hashem, if you merit to have Hashem's kindness, but it's not kol habol likbaitz, whoever jumps will be able to jump. Doesn't always work that way. Not everyone can merit to have that. You'll have the right people that are getting your tzedakah. Especially you go to Eretz Yisrael, everyone's holding their hand out. They look at you as the rich American. So when you pop over there, especially like by the Kaisel or any of these Mekaymas Akdoshim, everyone, all of a sudden, you give one person $1, everyone's sticking their hand out. You have no idea, is everyone really need money? Every single person who held their hand out, you never know. But you hope that the Eibishter arranges that the people who need at least got. So it's a chesed Hashem if you merit it. So the Gemara says, Yachal af Yori Shemayim came. You might think that if you're a Yori Shemayim, you also don't always merit that Hashem is going to arrange that the person who needs it will get it. So the Talmud Laima, the Pasuk says, Chesed Hashem me'olam ve'ad olam al yireyav, that Hashem's kindness is always for those who fear Him. That if you have Yirah Shamayim, so the right people will merit the tzedakah. You'll be able to give it to the right, you'll give it to the people, so the person who really needs it. Now, Amar Rav Chama bar Papa. Rav Chama bar Papa says, "Kol ad mishesh olav chein, person who has grace, biyoduashu yori shemayim. For sure, he's a fearer of heaven. Shenemar chesed Hashem miyolam biad olam al yireyav. The kindness of Hashem, and here we're saying the kindness referring to the grace that He has. There's a certain blessing of chein, of grace. That kindness of Hashem is al yareyav, is on those who fear Him. So if a person has chein, it's for sure he's a yarei shamayim. The term chesed sometimes means chein. We see tisa chein v'chesed b'fanav. So the chein, it goes to those who have Yirah Shamayim. If a person has chein, for sure he's got Yirah Shamayim. And the Rebbe Lazar, another statement of Rebbe Lazar. We keep saying Rebbe Lazar statements. This whole Gemara was Rebbe Lazar. Hainu Dama Rebbe Lazar. We got involved with this whole Gemara all because we started talking about the Shisin, and that was that pasuk in Shir Hashirim, Song of Songs. It was a pasuk that we brought, and then once we brought that pasuk, we started darshaning that pasuk, and that pasuk led us to that Torahs like Chamuke Yerechech, and says like and that led us to the concept of tznius, which is Rabbi Elazar, and then we have all these other statements about Rabbi Elazar, about tzedakah and chesed, and so on, and chein. And now comes the next statement. What does it mean when it says, which we say in the Eishas Chayil, it says Pia Pascha b'chachma, that she opens her mouth with wisdom. She has the Torah, the teachings of kindness on her tongue. Torah of kindness. What's the Torah of kindness? Is Torah of kindness? Is Torah that's not kind? What does it mean? Pia Pascha Chachma, that this Esha Schayel, this woman of valor, is she opens her mouth with wisdom and she has the Torah Chesed on her tongue. What's the Torah of Chesed? Is there one Torah of Chesed and one Torah that's not kindness? Ella, rather, Torah lishma zui Torah shel Chesed. When you learn Torah for its sake, then that's called Torah of Chesed. It gives grace to you. It gives Chesed to the person who learns it. But if you learn Shaloi Lishma, if you learn Torah not for the right purpose, instead you're learning Torah to be called, to get honor, to be called a great rabbi, to be able to Chas v'shalom, to argue with other people. So that type of Torah, Zui Torah She'ena Shal Chesed, that's a Torah that's not Chesed. It doesn't bring kindness. It doesn't mean grace to the to you, and it doesn't bring kindness to the world. That's called the Torah She'ena Shal Chesed. Igadamri, and some say another meaning. Torah l'lamda, when you learn Torah in order to be able to teach it to others, not just to keep it yourself. Zui Torah shel Chesed, that's a Torah of kindness. But shaloi l'lamda, you're learning it not to teach. Zui Torah she'ena shel Chesed, this is a Torah that's not of Chesed, and by learning such Torah, you won't have the grace, you won't have the Torah Chesed. You won't merit to have that grace. That's why it says al l'shoina, on her tongue, that she's teaching it to, that it's about teaching it to someone else. Teres chesed al l'shoina. But when it's on her tongue, meaning to teach it, then it's considered teres chesed. Okay, now we're up to the next. We've concluded the Agadata Gemara, and now we're back to the real deal. We're talking about the way they would fill the golden pail with water in order to use for the Niso Chamayim, for the water libation. And when it fell on Shabbos, they had to fill it before Shabbos, because otherwise it would have been carrying. They filled it from the Shiloyach, from the spring called the Shiloyach spring, and then they would fill it in a pail that was not holy. So it would be filled in a pail that was not holy. Why? Because, so the Gemara is going to deal with that. Why? I mean, the simple understanding is, as the Gemara will say, it has something to do with the fact that if you put it in something holy, then overnight it becomes what's called lina. It's something that stays overnight becomes invalid. But if it's not in a holy thing, then there's no prohibition of lina. This is one of the things we're going to see here. There is another concept here that we'll also see, and that is that if it's more than you need, then that's not going to be invalidated by something that stays overnight. It's when you have the right amount, that would be invalidated. So here, the Gemara is going to have to deal with these two issues, really, and a third issue as well, and that is, did you have kavanah? Did you have intent that the vessel should make it holy? If you had intent that the vessel will make it holy, then it will be invalidated when it stays overnight. But what about if you didn't have that in mind? If you didn't have in mind that it should become holy, will it automatically become holy anyway? And therefore it'll become invalidated? Or will it not make a difference? Does your intent, will that play a role? So the Gemara says, the same way it was done during the weekday, it was done on Shabbos, except that they would fill from Erev Shabbos a barrel of the chavis, a pail of zahav, of gold, with this water, which is a barrel that was eina mikudeshes. It was not a holy vessel from the Beis Hamikdash, holy vessels. It was not one of those. And then you would leave it until you needed it on when they brought the morning sacrifice, that's when they would do the libations, and then you would pour the water libation. So this is when it fell on Shabbos. So the Gemara says, why did you fill it with a vessel that was not holy? Nasi b'mekudeshes. Let's bring the water in a vessel that is holy. And the understanding of the Gemara is that, number one, you will maybe fill more water than you need. In this way, it will not become invalidated by staying overnight, because it's more than you need for the libation. And so it's not fit for the Nisach Hamayim the way it is. It's really more than what you need. In addition to that, or I should say alternatively, you have in mind, the Gemara's question is, bring a holy vessel, and just don't have in mind, or specifically have in mind, that it will not become holy until that the water inside it will not take on the holiness until the next day when you're going to pour it. Because if it takes on the holiness now, it's going to be invalid by tomorrow, because it's called lina. It stayed overnight. Something that stayed overnight is not valid to use for the Beis HaMikdash. So therefore, if it was not sanctified, if the water does not become sanctified, so it doesn't count. It's not a problem. It could stay overnight. Then once it becomes sanctified, it can't be used. So have in mind that you're not sanctifying it. So that's the Gemara's question. Bring it in a holy vessel and get around the problem of lina by either having extra water or by not sanctifying the water, by having in mind that it's not being sanctified. Amar Zeiri says, Kosovar in Shir Lamayim. This opinion of the Mishnah, this author that says this law in the Mishnah, holds Ein Shir Lamayim. There's no measure for the Nisach Hamayim, in as much as you bring will always be the right amount. And so you can't say, I'm going to bring more and I'm going to fill the barrel up with extra water, more than the 3 lugin, according to the rabbis, or more than 1 lug, according to Rabbi Yehuda. You can't say that, because whatever extra you bring is appropriate. It's apropos for the Nisach Hamayim, because you could bring more. There's Ein Shir. There's no limit. You could bring extra. So that would actually sanctify the water if you brought extra, because that's fit to be used for the water libation. But this opinion holds additionally that uklishares mekadshin shlemidas, in holy vessels called the klishares, the serving vessels, they are mekadesh, they sanctify what's in the vessel, even shaloi midas, even without intent. And therefore, if you use a holy vessel called a klishares, and to draw the water, what's going to happen is, guess what? Even if it has extra water, the water is going to become sanctified. And even if you had in mind that it's not supposed to be sanctified, it doesn't help, because even shaloi midas, even if you don't have in mind that the water will become sanctified. The water will become sanctified. So the Gemara says, "V'imaisi b'mekudeshes," and if you do end up using this holy vessel, klishares, so if salulahu balina, it'll become invalid with staying overnight. So that's what the Gemara says. That's why you need to use a non-sanctified vessel. And then it will not be sanctified. It'll have been drawn. It won't be sanctified, but you'll have it. You won't have to carry it. You have it already there, ready. And then when it comes along the next morning, then you put it in a sanctified vessel. Now the Gemara says, another opinion, Chizkiya Amar, Klishares ein mekadshin ela midas. Chizkiya says, really, Klishares, holy vessels, are only mekadesh, the water, what's in them, if you have in mind. And so really you could get around this whole problem by having in mind that it's not going to be holy, or don't have in mind that it should be holy. And then you won't have this problem of the water becoming sanctified and then becoming invalidated when the night kicks in. It stays overnight when the night ends, I should say. And if the psul, the invalidation of lina, kicks in, you don't have that problem really, because you didn't have das. You didn't have in mind that it should be sanctified, that the water is being sanctified the night before. So therefore it should work. But it's a different problem. It's a technical issue. Ugzeira shema yoimru ladas niskadshu. You know what the problem is? There's a gzeira over here. There's a decree that we don't want you doing that option, even though it should work. But we're afraid someone will see, and they're gonna say, maybe people will think that they'll say you had in mind to make it sanctified, and still you're allowed to use it. And they'll say that libations don't have to be a problem, don't have a problem of lina, of staying overnight. And therefore, you wouldn't, if you don't fill it with a barrel that's sanctified, instead fill it with a barrel that's non-sanctified, and then you don't have this problem at all. But if you did use a barrel that was sanctified, so theoretically it should have been acceptable, because you didn't have in mind that it should sanctify the water. And if you didn't have in mind to sanctify the water, that works. The water is not sanctified. You didn't have in mind. And it helps. And the water wouldn't be sanctified, and it won't be invalidated with lina, except for the fact that the rabbis made a decree. Don't do that, because we're afraid someone will think that you're allowed to always use libations, even if you have in mind that it's sanctified. Libations can be overnight. That's what people are going to think. So therefore, we don't allow that. And therefore, we tell you, this is Chizkiah's understanding. We tell you, you have to use a barrel that is unsanctified. And now we have Rabbi Yanni, but I'm going to stop here. Tomorrow, Mitzvah Hashem, we will finish the chapter. Okay, Sei gesund, everyone. Have a wonderful day.
Thank you, Rebbe. Have a great day.
Thank you, Rabbi.
Thank you.
Okay. Okay, take care, Jeffrey. And everyone else. I see you keep